to be back this morning. My name is Mark Dodds. I grew up in little small town Saskatchewan. Kind of went through my playing career and now coach at the U of S. And I guess one of the big reasons that I got into coaching after playing was my parents. We were both teachers and volunteer coaches in every sport imaginable because we grew up in a town of 150 people, and so there weren't too many people around to do it. So with that being said, that's a big reason why I coach, and it's nice to see all of you coaching as well, and I appreciate what you guys do. I know here in Canada most of you are volunteer coaching, and with the emphasis on sports these days, that means a lot of time and a lot of effort, and so I just want to thank you guys for putting in even this extra time to come out and learn and hopefully enhance your coaching. I know for me personally, just sitting around listening to these last sessions, they've been great. I've been soaking it all in. I just finished my third year, and so still definitely learning and trying to enhance my own coaching. I want to thank Jeff. I don't know where he went. He's hiding over here. Thanks for having me out. A little bit of a connection. Jeff and I are both from Sask. We both played at Red Deer College different times, but a nice little connection here to Douglas College. I have a player on my team now that played here previously, and Katie is going to play for one more year and then come out to the U of S. Both of her parents are from Saskatoon. Her dad's a Husky football alumni. So the connections that I've made throughout the volleyball world and continue to make are pretty cool, and I think that's one of the biggest things that I wanted to mention was create a network. You see all these other coaches here that are local, get to know each other, pass on your numbers, and chat volleyball, discuss, talk. That's going to be one of the best ways to enhance your coaching, is to talk a lot of volleyball with a lot of people. My wife actually played 1 year here at Douglas College, so another little connection. And Ben, who's going to present next, Ben coached me for 1 year, one summer with the university games team that went to Turkey. So lots of connections here just within this coaching symposium. Mick was great last night. I really enjoyed listening to coaches that have been around for that long. And the reason I bring up Mick, Rob, Mark, you guys obviously did great jobs as well, and you guys have been coaching for
we get it.
a lot longer than
job, but not as good as Mick.
No.
It's all right.
You'll get why I brought up Mick. His record, Jeff put it in the book there. His record, 435 and 119. That's a lot of games, a lot of years. Mine right now is 28 and 45. So not a great record, first off, but just goes to show how long I've been around compared to Mick. Do you know what your overall record is in your coaching?
I don't, but I know the last 4 years it's not been good.
Yeah, okay.
Except in beach volleyball, it's been awesome.
Okay,
but
good.
Indoor volleyball, it's not great.
Okay. Hey, not everybody can win, right? So yeah, just going along with that, kind of creating that volleyball network, one piece of advice that I have is finding a good critic or mentor. And when we think about mentor, we think about somebody that's got to be much older than us or been around for a long time so that they can fill us full of wisdom. That's not necessarily always the case. Find somebody that is another set of eyes for yourself, so that maybe it's someone that can be at your practice once a month or come watch some of your games, that's going to be another set of eyes to give you some feedback. Obviously, they hopefully have a little bit of knowledge in the game of volleyball. Probably not beneficial to get your one of your siblings or your parent to come watch and just pump your tires and tell you did a great job. So the topic here, creating tactical practices to enhance an athlete's performance and how it can transfer to the game. It's a pretty broad topic, and so today I'm basically just going to go over some ideas, some concepts that hopefully you can put into your practices or use to help create your practices to best develop your athletes, and ultimately that's why we're all here, right? So first off, this is something that I do. I pass it. Next, I'm not good at writing on boards. Serving. Okay, next. Blocking. Blocking, yep. Two more. Setting and attacking. There we go. So we've got our five skills that we need to teach, that we need to develop with our athletes. I know yesterday there's not everybody here, but how many people are coaching 15U and under? Okay, yeah, kind of. And then everyone else is obviously above that, so about half. So if we have to come up with 100%, what, or I guess a priority list, which is going to be the most important? Passing? Everybody in full agreement that passing is number one?
If they're very young, serving.
Serving. Okay, so again, it depends on the age, but we're going to go 1 and 1.5 because those are the two main skills. First contact serving, first contact passing. Okay, now the other three, which comes second or third, I guess? Setting. And then? Yeah. And blocking comes in a distant fifth in my mind, especially most of us are coaching 15U and under, even 16, 17, just in terms of developing, especially on the female side. I kind of have a bit of a sense that most of us are coaching females here. Blocking is a very distant fifth. And going back to Mark's session yesterday with the blocking, we don't need to start developing blocking or training blocking until we have players on the other side that are hitting the ball down into the court that essentially need to be blocked. And kind of at that 15U age is sort of when it starts, where you may have one or two players on another team that can start to do that, but they probably hit it down and not hard enough that it necessarily isn't diggable or defendable. Okay, so this priority list has to come into play when you're starting to plan your practices and prepare sort of a season plan, but also a daily plan to decide what you're going to work on and how much you're going to work on it. I put a percentage on it usually, and you guys can all do that on your own, but blocking I kind of go down to about 5%. And then obviously these two need to be upwards of sort of 60% in combination, and then the other two making up that other percentage. So something to keep in mind there. Again, different levels, different age groups. We're all coaching different levels, and so that starts to change as we go through our level. But it's usually a good starting point for you with your team, and it may change year to year, or from high school if you're coaching a high school team to a club team. Those percentages may start to change, but it's a good way to begin. Okay, so number one on my list, I've got why. Okay, why are we doing this, coach? And I think, especially in today's day and age, where kids have so much access to information and the internet, obviously, they're able to go and look at volleyball videos, this and that, and they want to know why they're doing things. And so, as a coach, being able to simply communicate that so that your athletes are buying in. And so, hey, why are we doing so much passing? Okay, it can be very simple. Well, hey, we took stats on the weekend. Okay, we take Mick's stat session yesterday. We took stats on the weekend. We want to pass a 2.0, and we're passing a 1.7. So we obviously need to do a little bit more work versus just running them out there and serving 1,000 balls at them. Get them to buy into kind of those goals. of trying to reach that 2.0. The why on technique is a big one. So you've heard here today probably some different technical cues or some different footwork or a few things that may be different than you've heard from another coach or that you've taught previously. So now you've got an athlete who comes to you and says, yeah, but coach, Rob told me that I have to do a four-step approach, and you're telling me to do a three-step approach. Okay, as a coach, it's pretty important that you can communicate why to your athlete that you want them to do it a certain way, because you may get challenged as a coach. And so within your practice planning, if you're deciding to teach a certain technique or a skill a certain way, to be able to back up as to why you're doing that. And I really like what Rob said this morning. I made a note as he said it. Prove to them why it's hurting their performance. Okay, so if they're asking why can't I do it my way, then you can prove to them video, stats, by showing successful athletes doing it another way to prove to them to say, hey, this is how it has to be done to be successful. And ultimately, if you can get your athletes to buy into the way you're doing it, it becomes much easier to plan your practice and start to execute those skills the way you want them done. Okay, number 2, 15-minute increments. Okay, this is one that I've sort of battled with, and again, it's very different at different age groups and different levels, skill levels, but trying to break your practice into increments, and 15 minutes is kind of a good one. We got a 2-hour practice. We get 8 increments. You get warm up, work on this skill, work on this skill, work on this skill, and then get into gameplay, whatever it is. But today's athletes or today's kids, because of again, technology and whatnot, sometimes their attention level or span doesn't last for much longer than that. So to be able to work on a skill, hammer it home for 15 minutes, okay, then move on to the next skill, can be beneficial for sure. Okay, and the next thing, and this was a question I think one of the coaches asked last night, and he's not here now, must be off coaching in mixed session. Something that I really believe in and structure my practice around is it doesn't always have to be something new. And that goes, we talk about kids having unlimited access to information. You guys as coaches do too, and there's a ton of information out there on the internet with different drills and different ways to do things, and it's super easy to access. And so sometimes it's fun as a coach. Let's change this up. Let's change this drill we're doing. Let's try something new, because I want to keep my athletes engaged. The reason that for me, I like to stick to consistent drills throughout a season, throughout a phase of the year, is pretty simple. You don't have a lot of time. Okay, we talked about how precious time is, and if you're constantly having to teach an athlete a new drill or teach a team a new drill and understand what the rotation is, when the next ball's coming in, there's going to be scrambled brains, and all of a sudden you waste a practice or a chunk of practice, and then you try it again the next practice, and all of a sudden it takes 3 or 4 practices of doing that drill to have your team finally comfortable doing it, versus sticking with what you've been doing that's ultimately still training the same skills, same idea, same concept, where the athletes are comfortable doing it. And this also allows for them to progress. So if you continue to do the same drill, at the start of the year, you can set a goal and see where your team's at. And if you continue to do that drill at the end of the year, you can now show them, again, you want to prove to your athletes, hey, look, at the start of the year, we could only pass 5 good in this drill. At the end of the year, we're at 25 good in this drill. So keep staying consistent with your practice plans can be very beneficial, especially when you only have 2 practices a week, 4 hours a week. It gets a little bit different when you get into coaching every day and you've got 2 to 3 hours a day that you can work with your athletes. Now you can start to become a little bit more varied. Okay, and again, just to echo Rob again, using warm-up to get better. So using warm-up, using a skill in warm-up to warm up. Lots of times we go out and we run around or we play a game with one ball, and I'm guilty of doing it too, where we play a game with one ball, tennis, whatever, and now one person's touching the ball at a time, and all of a sudden you're not getting a lot of reps in that are helping your team. Okay, so just continuing on with limited time and limited coaching. Okay, how many of us I won't say consistently, hopefully not consistently, but find ourselves at practice with just one coach. You're the only coach and you've got 12 athletes. Okay, not all the time, but for sure it happens. So it's pretty tough to plan a practice when you're the only coach there and you have 13-year-old athletes and they can't pop in a ball, do you have questions, sir?
No.
Nope, sorry. They can't put in free balls, they can't necessarily help you run the practice. It becomes very difficult to plan because you, again, have limited time and young athletes. So when I first started coaching, one of the things that I tried to execute was 400 to 600 reps per athlete per practice. And that goes through all the skills. But again, lots of times in volleyball, the way that we structure a drill is we've got one coach standing here and we've got a line of athletes and I'm going to serve balls at them. So I serve a ball, first person passes, somebody catches the ball, and then we rotate. Okay, we do that for 10 minutes. How many reps does each athlete get? Okay, now obviously if you're the only coach and you've got 13 new athletes, they're not necessarily going to be able to serve that ball where you can have three lines of passers and triple the amount of reps that you're doing. But there can be ways to vary that drill. Have the athletes throw the ball. Okay, again, Rob talked about warm-up with his athletes where coaches are just throwing balls in because they're not warm and they just want to get those reps in. Well, if we're doing 13, 14U, then the athletes can throw the ball. Hopefully they can all throw the ball within that 3-step range that their teammates can pass. Now instead of having you as a coach hitting every ball into one athlete at a time, you can have 4 athletes tossing to 4 athletes, and we've enhanced a whole bunch of reps, or we've added a whole bunch of reps into a very simple part of practice. Okay, so these are in no specific order as well, but define goals. Okay, I kind of mentioned that. In practice, obviously for games, we do it, but just having those goals and statting. So we do it in practice all the time, in games all the time. We stat all of those areas that Mick talked about. At 13, 14, 15U, maybe we're not having our stats that enhanced, but we're keeping track of serving percentage. We're keeping track of potentially passing average. And those are great ways to plan your practice, obviously, around what the stats say. So we need more work on serving, we need more work on passing. That was something we talked about last night as Mick was doing stats. But the balance there is, and Mick said it, these stats sometimes are for you as a coach to take in so that you can plan your practice, so that you know what needs to be worked on. But you don't necessarily want to take those numbers to a 14-year-old athlete and start to say, hey, well, you're passing a 1.4 today. That wasn't very good. And all of a sudden a 14U athlete is going, I have no idea what you're talking about, coach. So using those numbers, one, just for yourself, but finding a way to communicate that to your athletes so that it gives them some goals. Okay, and it may not be that it's a specific number that they're chasing after, that they have to pass a 2.0, but finding a way to communicate those goals and using stats to try to help back them up, because that could be a great way to do it. I coached a 14U team 2 years ago, my first year when I got onto the women's side. Coached a 14U team, and our only 2 stats that we only did, well, it was 2 stats, but one added on to the other, was 3 hits. So 14U girls team, and the girls on the bench had to give a check mark every time that we used 3 hits. And then we added on top of that the check mark became a star anytime that we overhand attacked the ball. And so our first game of the season, I think we had 1 star. Or 1 star per set was kind of our average. And that was because the coaching was pretty poor. But by the end of the season, we ended up getting upwards of 8 to 10 attacks per set. And so that was a very simple goal kind of stat to use to one, motivate the girls, but also in practice to give them that goal to make sure that they're working on a very simple aspect of the game, which is using 3 contacts. Okay, so this next one, kind of communication to your athletes, and this one is, again, tough depending on how many coaches you have and how often they're there, but giving sort of instant and continuous feedback to your athletes during practice, and sort of planning to have that involved in your practice with that feedback is a skill in terms of timing with your practice. So for me, I'm terrible at it. I plan my practice and I give this amount of time for this, and then we forget that we're going to stop that drill 3-4 times to give feedback, to make changes, to ask athletes to make changes to their technique. And all of a sudden, the amount of reps that we wanted to get in, we don't even get close to that because we've added in the communicating aspect of practice. And so when you're planning your practice, make sure that you keep that in mind. The time that it's going to take to introduce drills, to make changes, to give feedback to your athletes. The next thing is with that is keeping your language consistent within your practice. And I've had some steep learning curves with this, but just even this weekend, kind of learning some new lingo. Hopefully you don't go back and start calling it the 10-foot line to your team because they might be a little bit confused, but learning some new lingo and some different ways different cues to give to your athletes, which are great. Again, that may be enhancing your ability to develop them, but throughout your season, trying to keep that language consistent and that lingo consistent so that your athletes aren't confused as to what you're trying to tell them to do. And for me, it was coaching a provincial team. So 2 summers ago, coaching the provincial team, you have them for 2 weeks, and then off to the tournament you go. So you don't have a lot of time to establish that communication or that lingo or for certain aspects of the game. And so we got to the tournament, and we were making a lot of hitting errors. And so I brought him into a timeout, and I just said, we need to manage our risk a little bit better here, okay? And off they went, and my assistant coach went down to the bench players and asked, what do you think Mark meant there? Do you guys understand what he meant by managing your risk? And they were all like, no, we don't know what he's talking about. I'm like, okay, well, thought it was pretty self-explanatory, but again, I hadn't used that lingo or that communication to them. So you do it in a game, and all of a sudden, they're sitting there going, their mind's spinning, well, what does coach mean? And we go back to Laura and her session yesterday, and she had mentioned that the same thing happened I think it was when she was an athlete, correct? Where her coach sort of did things one way, and all of a sudden they got to the championship, and she changed her communication to the team, and it drastically changed the ability of the athletes to just go out and play. Now all of a sudden they're thinking about, why is coach, what does this mean, or why is the coach doing this differently? And so that becomes pretty important, that communication aspect throughout practices, and then transferring that into a game and keeping it the same. We get to sometimes get to those end of the tournament, it's the semifinal, the pressure's on, and all of a sudden we want to bring out something that we heard at the coaching symposium and try to get our team to understand it or do it. Probably not the best time to try and implement that. Another, I guess, aspect of planning practices and throughout a season is staying patient. So volleyball, what did Mark say yesterday about volleyball being for young athletes? He said it's an atrocious sport, or he used some word yesterday that it's not a great sport for young athletes because it's a really difficult sport. And so I think one of the key things as a coach is to be very patient with your planning and not trying to get ahead of yourself with what you're doing with your athletes, okay? We aren't going to, at 14U, maybe be able to run quick sets in the middle and try to implement some of the offensive strategies that Ben is going to talk about coming up here, where those offensive strategies won't work for 14Us because they just can't execute it, because the game is very difficult. So being very patient and getting back to the simple things, getting back to just developing those basic skills. And the kids, unfortunately, will try to push your buttons. Can we jump serve today? Can we jump float serve? Well, Sally, you can only make one serve out of 10 right now, standing float. So no, we can't jump serve. But they're still going to demand it. They're still going to want to do it. And so continuing to be patient and sticking to your plan to develop these athletes is quite important. Okay, one of the last thing I have here in this beginning section is, and it's something from what Mick said last night, was it seems like it's common sense sometimes, but as a coach we can get lost. We need to work on the areas of the game that are actually going to happen in the game. And so I ask this to kids all the time. No matter what group of kids I get, I circle them around, I go stand in the seven position, I say, okay, how many or what percentage of the time do you guys pass the ball right here? And then you get a whole bunch of numbers thrown out there. So coaches, what percentage of the time do your teams pass the ball into that perfect hula hoop zone to the center? Whether it's off serve receive, free balls coming over, defense, what percentage of the time? Throw out some numbers. 30. 5? 30? 15? 10, yeah. So, 5. No jokes. My 14U team that I coached a couple of years ago, it was 5. It was maybe 3.5. But unfortunately, we still have lots of teams that will go out and will spend literally half an hour where the coach will toss the ball to the center in that position, and they'll set the ball out to the hitter and do a whole bunch of reps, just like we were doing with Kate, right? And we do that for half an hour of a 2-hour practice of our 4 hours in the week. And then we get to the games on the weekend, and it happens 5% of the time, 10% of the time, 15% of the time. And that, to me, just doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense to do that and then not be able to actually implement it in the game. So, yes, common sense, but look at your team. What's happening out there? Where are we passing the ball to most of the time? And then we need to try to plan our practices around. Obviously, we want to get better at getting the ball there at a higher percentage of the time. But we can work on lots of the out-of-system stuff. Setting, non-setter setting, making it a hittable ball, trying to get 3 hits, with that third one actually being an overhead attack rather than free ball, free ball, free ball, till somebody actually gets a free ball pass to the spot and then are able to go up and attack. Question?
So at that age level, like 14U, if your passing isn't to the point where you could run anything, you wouldn't even practice in the system?
would you stay out of system practice for hitting until you're passing?
Well, again, you've got to give the right amount of time to your practice to do skill development. And at that 14-year age group, you're trying to get 600 reps per athlete. That means that you've got to have lots of skill development aspects. And so we want them to work on getting their arms back and being explosive with that 4-step approach. Okay, we're going to need to be able to do that a whole bunch of times. The problem with coach tossing, one ball getting set, one hitter going at a time. Hey, how about we have one coach there, one coach in 3? I mean, obviously if you've got 3 coaches, but get the kids. A 14U can toss the ball up in the air, hopefully like this, and now we've got a hitter working on their approach there, another one 3 meters away, another one 3 meters away, and now we can get them doing approach, back up, get a new ball, work on that technique, and that's still in system, okay? I mean, you could have the tosser, it'll probably be out of system or more difficult with a 14U tossing because the ball will be all over the place. But you get what I mean. So the problem is we always default with our practice planning to those basic situations that if you actually had someone sit on the side and keep track of the reps that one player was getting, how many of us think that our each individual player would be getting 400 reps or more in a practice? Okay, and at that age group, it's going to be more important for them to get those reps, whatever it is. If you just spread them out around the gym and they're working on, partner sets to me, back set it back over their head, right? Working on the back set technique. Now those 3 players are getting a rep every third contact, or the middle person every 2. But it's going to be more important at the 14-year age group to get those reps, whether it's random and all over the place, than those sort of, we watch volleyball on TV and the ball goes to the setter and the ball goes to the hitter and we go and hit it. Well, that's what we're going to do with the 14-year age group. Probably not very beneficial.
For that particular age group, would you recommend using 4-2 or right front setter? If the skill level is not, trying to get there.
With my team, we used just front right setter, yeah.
Okay.
So we rotate, you're the
setter
setter.
and the right front setter.
Yeah, because they all need to set, they all need to hit, they all need to pass. And if we start at that age group specifying with our athletes that you're going to be a setter and you're going to be a left side hitter in the middle, I think we're hindering their development. And so, and that goes to, again, going back to the 400 to 600 reps. If you stick a player and say you're our setter, and now that's all they're doing, they're not getting any of the passing reps in practice, that's going to, again, hinder their development. It happened to me. I grew up, both my parents coached, so I started playing volleyball when I was in grade 3. I'd go to the junior girls practices, and so when I got to grade 6, I could set, and everyone else was just starting volleyball, so then I was the setter. And I legitimately did not serve receive a volleyball from grade 7 to grade 12 in high school volleyball. I never once serve received a ball. And then I became a passing left side hitter. You wonder why I was a bad passer, hey Ben? I improved, yes. I was able to improve drastically because I'd never done it before, so it had to get better. But going back to it, it seems crazy to me now as a coach to look back on that and go and understand that it actually happened. Where in the simple drills, I did the underhand stuff, but I never actually was in doing serve receive. And it kind of seems a little bit baffling right now to look back on it that way. Any other questions? Okay, I've got a couple things here, just sort of areas that within our practice that we can adapt and adjust from what we potentially are doing now to hopefully make it better for the athletes. And again, like I said, I'm still learning and adjusting and adapting, and I love coming to these sessions, these types of things, because I get to listen to other coaches that know what they're doing and learn. And so, again, more or less nothing that you're hearing today is my own. It's all stuff that I've learned, and hopefully you guys are taking a lot of stuff away from this weekend. But kind of the two most important areas of, well, the most important area of the game, and this comes from Rob again. Yesterday you emphasized it, is reading. Okay, it's going to be the most important part of the game, because if you can't make the proper read, if you see something happening and you just can never be in the right place or anticipate and read what's going to happen, you're probably not going to be a very good volleyball player. And so we need to try to have within our drill structure lots of opportunity to read and understand what's going on. And if you're hitting off of a box to a player, they're going to get a lot of great technical work. They're going to work on their technique, and they're going to be able to dig balls, but there isn't any of that reading. They didn't have to read where the set was going. They didn't have to move. They just got to stand there and get balls hammered at them. And again, balance. There has to be that balance between that technical repetition and then getting into the tactical side of the game, where they have to read what's going on. And so that reading aspect becomes pretty important. We've got to have a good chunk of our practice planning where the drill is going to force the athlete to make a read and have to defend the ball or block the ball or make a read and attack the ball. Okay, and then decision making. The game's made up of, it's a game of decisions, and most in volleyball are split-second decisions. Okay, am I gonna, as the ball's coming to me, am I gonna hit this cross court? Am I gonna hit a line? Am I gonna tip it? Am I gonna roll it? Okay, where's the blocker? And those decisions are obviously very difficult, most of them. Okay, as a setter, ball's coming to me, am I gonna set middle? Am I gonna set front, back, pipe, whatever the case is? Those decisions are pretty difficult. And going back to a comment that Mick made yesterday, but also when I played with the national team, Glenn Hogue, same thing. Our goal was a maximum of 6 errors. So we are allowed to make 6 errors per set, and if we make any more than that, we're probably putting ourselves in a bad position to win. And so Mick echoed that yesterday. And so if we have that as a goal to our athletes, obviously those decisions become more difficult, because what is a kid thinking? What is an athlete thinking? I don't want to make one of those 6 errors. So now with that pressure, those decisions become more difficult. And there's a ton of variables that are involved with those decisions, especially with young athletes. One, I just don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to disappoint my coach, my teammates. I don't want to get embarrassed. Okay? If I make a mistake, if I mishit the ball and it goes under the net, which happens on my team, not very often, but it'll happen the odd time. But with young kids, it'll happen. So now they're embarrassed. Their decision the next time, are they going to go up and take a swing on it, or are they just going to choose to set it over? So again, we've got to implement a good amount of decision-making into our practice on top of the technical side of the development. So we just had Kate out here. Obviously, Kate got lots of good reps. How many decisions did Kate have to make today?
A lot.
A lot of decisions? So when she was attacking, what kind of decisions was she making?
She's basically making sure that hitting it high.
Yeah,
Get
so
forward, those kind of things.
yeah, so those were the technical aspects. She was having to think about doing the things that Rob was asking. But once she got up there to hit the ball, she hit the ball in the same place every time. And I know that because I was shagging and I stood there and she hit it right to me. So she didn't have to make any decisions. She just had to focus on the technical side of things, get up, boom, hit the ball in the court. And we need lots of those reps because, again, we have to hammer home the technical side of the game. But now we've got to add in a decision making. And so one of the things, I'll go into attacking here and just sort of talk about a few things that we do or that you can do to help with that decision making. So again, attacking. If I had Kate back out here and all of a sudden we toss that up the mat. Okay? Now she has to make a decision as to where she's going to hit. And then if I actually become a blocker and I take away the line, I take away cross court, okay, these mats can be a double block. You can make them into a single blocker. And now you don't have to have a coach, or an athlete jumping as many times as our athletes jump. We want to try to keep them healthy but at the same time, you get into that sort of 14, 15 age group. How many players do you have on your team that can actually put up a block that's going to force hitters to make a decision? Okay, not many. So again, a development piece that we can do to force our hitters to make those decisions is to implement or put in a block. Those pads can be great. Again, they don't move very well. Depends on who you have working the blocking pad. But lost my train of thought there. Give me a second, I'll find it. Going back to Mark's session yesterday. So somebody asked about swing block or stationary block. Again, this is a progression that athletes are going to go through as they get to a higher level. If I stood there with that mat and I put it up there, put the double block and just held it and I said, okay, now you guys hit line. I'm going to leave line open, go up and hit line. So they've got to make the decision. They see the block, they're going to go up and hit line. But the block's just sitting there. They can see it. They can see it before the block, before they start their approach. It's there during their approach. They go up and they hit the ball around it. So a block's never going to be set up and sitting there waiting for you to see it. The block's going to all of a sudden appear at the last second, jumping. If someone's swing blocking, now it's going to be even more mobile where they can't see the ball coming. And now when they get up there, that decision again is going to be more split second and more difficult to make as to where they're going to hit the ball. So the progression, obviously using the mat is great. Get them to work on those shots, thumb down, and so on. And then you can start to move the pad. Last second you move it, now they got to try to make the decision to hit where the block isn't. How many people have used the boxing mitts? So the flat pads that you can put on like gloves that the boxers punch when they're training. So you can put those on, stand up on the wood boxes, and now you've got kind of hand-sized pads that you can now move around and be a blocker. Nobody's going to lose a finger, or as a coach, you're not going to get your hands beat up. Okay?
Use a shovel.
Use a shovel.
For blocking.
I don't think I've heard that one before. Like a snow shovel?
Yes, the plastic ones.
The plastic snow shovel, eh? Interesting. How's the rebound off of that?
Great.
Okay, snow shovel. I like it. See, this is why you come to coaches symposiums, you learn.
Actually, it's an old trick. I saw it in a video. You know, Coach Brian might remember this gentleman. Mike Hebert had us
A
back
big
in the
snow
day.
shovel, eh?
Video, VHS.
Yeah.
That's where all my videos.
That's because he was coaching in Minnesota.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah, see, in
He
Saskatchewan,
had one on him all the time.
Yeah.
He had to have a snow shovel.
yeah, you don't have a snow shovel, eh?
We're using boogie boards.
Yeah. How the boogie boards, eh? Those are good rebounders. Because you have to keep in mind, whatever you're using, with national team in Winnipeg, our coaches had the bright idea that they built this big metal structure. And then up at the top, like it was solid metal, and they put the rubber from that you lay down in hockey rinks, so you can walk on it with your skates. So they took that inch thick rubber and they cut out hands, and then they put them onto this metal structure. So you had these four big hands. But what they didn't anticipate is that when you hit a volleyball into a chunk of metal that will not budge, it's coming back twice as fast. And Alex Gomon, who wasn't very good at controlling where he hit the ball, he wore a few in the face pretty hard. But we still used it after that. I don't understand what we were thinking. So, yeah, using some implements that are going to be safe for your athletes. But also, if we're doing that, we can get our athletes now, we want to get reps and develop skills. We have a hitter hitting against that block, trying to work on their game. We can have a player come in underneath. Now it hits that blocking pad and comes back. We work on that skill development, adding in players into those drills. If we're going up and working on that line shot, let's stick a digger in there. How many times do we just attack against nobody? Okay, have the rotation that you hit, become the digger, and then rotate through, versus just having that lineup of kids standing back there, picking their nose, waiting for their turn to go. Add in a cover, a block cover, add in a defender, add in 2 defenders, because then they're going to be able to get that touch and that rep. Okay, just to continue on quickly with attacking. Of course, time's going way faster than could have ever anticipated. But we're always looking, as an attacker, how can we score, okay? We're always trying to find that way to score. But in practice, we don't have many opportunities to train that. Hey, it's easy to score when there's no blocker and no defender. So we talk about progressions. The blocking pad, we get a coach up on the box with some mitts on or a shovel that we can move to force the athlete. And then getting into adding a blocker in, adding 2 blockers in, and then training, obviously, the out of system versus those blockers. But the progression and the planning has to be that we're trying to find those percentages of how much time do we need to just train the technical side of it. And we see with Kate, it's pretty easy to take an athlete that has trained at a higher level and got to train every day this year with Jeff to make some of those little changes or ask her to do something and she's able to change it. We go down to a 14U athlete. It's probably going to take a few more reps to get out of that athlete what we want versus an athlete at the level of Kate. Okay, do we have any more questions? I know this the time obviously goes by extremely fast when we're doing these and we get chatting volleyball. Hopefully there's been a little bit or a few things, some ideas that have sort of clicked here, but ultimately for me, I came here to learn a little bit as well, but to discuss volleyball. So I know Rob's still here, and we've got a few more minutes before my session ends, but are there any other questions that anyone has, just sort of in general to help out you specifically? Because I know these sessions sometimes get general, and with your team you maybe have some specific things that are haunting your team or that you want to try to focus on with your team.
How much would you divide the practice into technical and service?
So with my team at the university level, yeah, 13, 14, 15U. So when I coached that 13U, 14U team, we rarely did 6-on-6. Like, I mean, probably 2% of the time. And my team hated it. They hated me as a coach. Because I was going to do the things that they needed done to develop them as athletes. They wanted to play. They wanted to, oh, can we play 6-on-6? And yeah, great, we can play 6-on-6. And I'm going to go home because it's going to be awful. It's just going to be serve the ball over the net, shank it, somebody run and get it, serve it back over another shank or a 3-ball, and one person touching the ball. So we literally did 6-on-6 2% of the time in practice. They got to play 6-on-6 when we went to the tournament. And that was their chance to play. And the thing that they saw, well, hopefully they realized, by the end of the year, they got to a level that there was no chance they were getting to unless they put that much time in with the technical side of things, where they all could control the ball. Everybody could pass. Everybody could set that second ball, and we were getting 10 plus attacks in a set using 3 hits, which I didn't think we'd ever get to. So yeah, it's tough to balance that gameplay versus technical side, but at 14U, yeah, rarely ever.
I have a comment on that because I think it's really important. And this session's been really good. So I would say the same thing, like with younger kids, 6-on-6, rarely. When you do play 6-on-6, you're entering multiple balls, and there are lots of other things that you're doing, creating situations that they need. But in practice, one of the things you said, Mark, was that you're measuring things from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. So maybe you're not playing 6-on-6 a whole lot, but you're playing tons of little games. Even if that game is just serve 5 balls, go right on the whiteboard how many you got in, then go to the other side and serve 5 more. Serve to this zone. Play a little over the net pepper and count how many times it goes over the net. There's all these little games you're playing constantly to help them develop their ball control, their techniques, and everything else. But yeah, 6-on-6 where it's just whistle, serve, you miss, and now they get to serve. There's 4 aces, you know, in 4 minutes we've done nothing.
Yeah.
But you can do a lot of games. I think you should do a lot of games, keep track of things, so you can show them in a month and a half how much better they've gotten. You can do a lot of games that aren't 6-on-6.
Do you guys play triple ball south of the border?
Yeah, we do. Actually, I implemented that with our rec league. You know, I told them this is how you need to play your games. Yeah, we did that.
In BC, is there triple ball at 13U? Yeah. Just 13U and under, and 14U goes to regular?
I think
Oh, they'd have us play it at 18 if they could.
You don't like it, I'm guessing?
there's still.
I think at 13, 14U, there's benefit to it. Obviously, after that, it becomes...
It's every day in our practice. It's not high performance competition.
Yeah, true.
So what we're doing though in practice is we're taking the game and we're tweaking it to get what we want out of it, whether it's 12 and under, 14 under, 18 under. Rarely in college are we just scrimmaging. You're playing a game. You know, we're rarely doing that. There's a serve and we'll play it out, and then we're entering a transition ball. Then we're hitting a ball to setter, so a non-setter has to set. We're doing all these different things to work, to focus things on what we need to get. And then the other thing that we talked about, I think is important, you were talking about allocating or creating situations that are real, right? Mick said something about you've got to do things that are actually happening in the game.
Yeah.
When you let them play the game, the things that actually happen in the game happen. You know? So you're talking about you don't want to toss a bunch of balls right to the setter. So let them pass. And guess where the ball's going to go?
It's going to go where
It's
it
going to
goes.
go everywhere. So you have to play games with them because they will love it and it will be appropriate for their skill level. And that's what they need to see. They need to see that a lot. You know, your setter's going to get a workout passing her teammates' passes. You know?
Yeah.
You have to run around.
And I think one more thing here quickly that I think is important to mention. We all grew up and we've all been in practices where the coach is always putting those free balls in. Okay? My practice at university, for the most part, I've got 4 coaches that are there. You kind of want to have them doing something. You want to involve something. Hey, you can put free balls in when we're doing those 6-on-6 drills. I think what's more beneficial for the players in their development is to allow the players to put those free balls over. So as a coach, you can still enter the ball, but if that team's supposed to be getting the ball, rather than me from here putting a free ball over, how realistic is that? How many times is a team going to get a free ball from right here or from back here over the net? It simulates maybe a half serve or an easy serve, but now they have lots of time to set up and they're probably going to get that perfect ball. And again, that perfect ball is not happening in the game very often. So rather than me put a free ball in, I got Sally in 5. Sally tosses the ball. Now she's putting it over, and now we can work on what we're going to be working on in the game. Where are we putting that free ball? We want to try to put the other team in trouble. We're going to try to force them to be out of system if we can. Take the setter out of the play, whatever the case is. And now rather than this easy, mindless free ball, now the other team has to be prepared. Hey, where's Sally going to put that ball? Is she going to set it short to 2, deep to 5, whatever the case is? It's going to force Sally to get better at putting the team in trouble, and it's going to make the other team actually be ready to play a game-like ball versus a half serve from the coach. So the coach is still involved. The coach still gets an opportunity to help run the practice, but it changes the flow of those free ball situations that we're given to teams, or given to our athletes. Any other questions?
How do you deal with tapering your goal of 400 contacts season-wide, or do you
Well,
just change the style of contact, or?
It depends on that team. So you're right. If you've got an older team and it's 3 weeks before we're heading off to Edmonton for nationals, you're probably, hopefully, into that phase of the season that we're not going to be spending an hour and 40 minutes on technical stuff and then just a quick little 6-on-6 or wash stuff at the end. You may start to be an hour and an hour. So now your 400 reps drops to 200, 250 because of the phase of the season that you're in. At 14U, 13U, you're trying to get 600 every practice from day one to the end of the season, because those athletes need that one day where they get 600 reps versus they get to play some 6-on-6 and get 100 reps. Those 500 reps that they lose at that age are huge. And at 17U, 16, 17, 18U, they get that one day where they compete a little bit more. They're playing 6-on-6. I think, especially within a month of going to nationals, is going to be more beneficial than maybe that one day where they miss out on a few reps. But again, balance is difficult when you've got a short season, short practice sessions during the week. It's tough, but you got to consider all those things when you're planning and trying to prepare. And again, what is your goal as a coach? Is your goal to win that next tournament, or is your goal to develop that athlete so that they're as technically sound as they can be, so that when Rob comes and watches them play, he's like, man, that footwork is really good, that technique is really good, I want you to come play for me next year. Versus somebody that maybe isn't as technically sound, but as a team you guys play really well and maybe end up winning that game. Again, balance with sort of why you're doing what you're doing, and sometimes that's tough to balance.
Yeah, you got to win a bit. You guys don't watch a lot of Div 3.
Hey, I like watching good athletes, so you sneak in, you watch, and if there's an athlete that's late developing and whatnot, again, in Division 3 you can be technically sound, you can have great footwork, you can do a lot of things really well, and maybe you're on a team. When I played club in grade 9, I was on the worst club team in the whole province. I don't think we won a game the whole year. I don't really remember because I washed it out of my memory, but at that point in my career, I was on the worst club team in the province, and the team that won that season had a whole bunch of superstar studs, and not many of them went on to play at the next level because they were good in grade 10 and they weren't very good when they were 19 years old. So yeah, it's a tough balance for sure. Anything else?
Is there anything you do within the practice to help with morale of the team?
Ooh.
Especially younger kids.
So just sort of that team building aspect and trying to, I think those little mini games and those little, I'll say competition, but team morale sometimes doesn't go well with competition because somebody's losing. So personal competition and making the game an individual game for everybody, whether it's serving, right? Serve 5 balls over, and understanding your team and understanding the level of your team to set that first goal and make it very attainable. So that everybody gets to run over to the whiteboard and check off that they've made their 5 serves, and everyone's kind of excited and happy and cheering. And then when that morale gets built up, then you can start to demand and say, okay, now we need to make 15 serves. And all of a sudden you've only got 2 people that end up making their 15. But your team morale, hopefully you've established that a little bit, that now you can demand that, no, we need to have a higher expectation here. But if you do that right away at the start of the season and you kill team morale because your expectation is way too high, that's probably not going to go very well. So I think you can do that, again, within the practice. It doesn't have to be something separate where we're doing some team building on the side and playing some silly game. It can be done, like Rob said, warm-up can be done playing volleyball. Team morale can be done playing volleyball. You've just got to structure it that way.
That's where you do too, what you were talking about. A big part of morale is you have to show them they're making progress. Because there's someone on your team that's really bad, that's the worst. She's the worst, and she knows it, everyone knows it. But if you can show her that she's getting better, her morale will be, typically will be awesome. Like, look, 3 weeks ago you could make 2 serves out of 10. Now you're making 7. Everyone else is making 15, but you're getting better. And so that's, don't you think, Mark?
100%. That's exactly what I mean.
Mark's answer is perfect on that. Just keep track of stuff and show them the progress.
Yeah, make it individualized. It is a team game, but your progress is your progress. And if you continue to progress, you're going to make our team better. And that's morale boosting for every human being right there.
That 6 errors, what he's talking about, that's like a high level.
Yeah.
On this level, I told myself 6 errors, that's possible, and I'll never come back again.
Never, yeah.
What sort of figure can you realistically talk to? Because I like that idea of them being aware that they can't
There is a number,
make
yeah.
in this area.
I think there's no way I could come up with that number right now, but you could go back to your team and to your level and watch the next tournament and just kind of keep track of how many errors your team made, or in the match how many errors were made by both teams combined, and sort of track it for one tournament and then see how consistent it is from match to match. And if it's kind of like, oh yeah, it's about 13, boom, then you can use that again to go back to your practice and communicate to your team that this is what's happening. This isn't just our team, this is what's happening. Whereas if you do it with just your team and maybe you're a Division 3 team and you're making 13, but the Division 1 teams are making 7, and you go back to your team and be like, well, we need to make 7 errors. Well, that's not going to really jive again, like you said, high level versus a different level. You've got to sort of feel out what's the norm in your level, and then use that to try to direct and guide your athletes.
I had a 6 to 8 year old kid first session. I told him, go on the baseline, serve. I don't care how many or what type of service form you have to serve it over. None. All right. So I introduced him to this torque serve from where you serve it from the side of your body, torque your body to the court. Next thing you know, the whole gym just erupted because they went from 0 to 1 in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And by the way, the torque serve is for little kids.
Sidearm, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just do it this. You face the wall, 3 o'clock, toss it high, and you use your torque your body like that. It's amazing like how much I was being morale boosted from some of these
Absolutely.
kids. And from every practice that all right, I just tell them, give me 5 torque serves.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think one of the best morale boosters for that age group is to have everyone line up across the end line and serve, and have everyone make a serve, all at the same, one at a time or whatever, but everyone end up making a serve. And it might take till month 3 or 4 of the season for that to happen, but when it does happen, the fireworks start shooting off.
They're up to 3 now, so
Nice.
moving up.
Okay, I think we'll maybe shut her down there, and Ben can take over in a couple minutes and talk about some offense.